Hi, welcome to this, my 47th episode of VideoFuzzy. I'm your host, Terry J. Aman, and in this installment titled Podcasting in Plain Sight, I finally highlight the USA Network production of In Plain Sight as my Friday night feature. I discover some absolutely wild and unexpected cross-connections throughout my media collection. Plus, out on a recent road trip, I met up with a fellow podcaster and the sweetest, smartest man in the whole world, Mark Bailey, also known as Grill Wolf, to talk Avengers Endgame. Welcome to the show.
He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy.
And what's going on with me? I finally got my lawn mowed, which was just the first step in what needs attention out there, but even after cleaning the air filter and switching out fresh oil and fresh gas in the mower, my grass was still so tall, wet, heavy, and thick in some spots that the mower still coughed, sputtered, and gave up occasionally. Even with side discharge, the clippings clogged up the works I needed to clear it, but after last fall, where even with watering, sometimes the grass looked like it was barely hanging on, this frankly was an excellent problem to have. Just to mention it, next month will mark the 2-year anniversary of VideoFuzzy. I'm still putting that together, so if anyone would like to be a part of it, there will be contact information at the end and in my show notes. Beyond that, as I mentioned, got out to DC to visit friends earlier this month, took in an excellent movie I will chat about presently. Right now, I'm back in Bismarck enjoying a medium roast at City Brew here, listening to, oh wow, Ellie Goulding's Lights, Colin Hayes' acoustic cover of Who Can It Be Now, Della Griffin's It Could Happen to You, the Indigo Girls' What Are You Like, and Anya Marina's All the Same to Me and Fine Young Cannibal's cover of Suspicious Minds. Really some great music here. I'm so ready to chat about some media, so let's dive on in.
Friday night feature.
As I've been promising now for a few months, since about February when the pilot episode first appeared in my classic collection, I'm finally going to chat about the USA Network's Mary McCormick Frederick Weller vehicle In Plain Sight, which premiered in the summer of 2008 and first showed up in my classic collection on disc 614. The fifth episode, Who Shot Jay Arnstein, showed up on disc 671, and as an aside, I just realized this past week I no longer have thousands of DVDs left to catalog. Technically, I had 2,570 homemade DVD transfers in my classic collection. As of this episode, I've cataloged 673 of them, leaving me 1,897 left to get through. Now, that's still quite a lot, but I've technically only got hundreds to process now rather than thousands, so progress continues apace. My reaction to this episode were entangled somewhat with second season episodes of USA's Burn Notice, turning up in my collection for the first time since the season 1 finale I cataloged but didn't so much as mention back in the summer of 2017. Jeffrey Donovan, his profile somewhat higher in my episode 12 discussion of 2004's Touching Evil, runs around Miami as a former CIA agent, moving the business along with voiceovers about what it's like to be a spy. In Plain Sight was kind of still finding itself, also employed the cheesy voiceovers. Mary McCormick as Mary Shannon talking about what it's like to be a witness security or WITSEC inspector. A while ago, I pulled up my archive recordings from my TV is the New Reading podcast, and this was one of the shows I reviewed at the time, looking at 3 shows helmed by strong female leads, Kira Sedgwick in The Closer, Holly Hunter in Saving Grace, and Mary McCormick in Plain Sight. I concluded that In Plain Sight seemed to be having the most trouble figuring out what it was. The show touched on significant drama, people trying to do the right thing while running for their lives under threat of death from criminal elements. But then you got her little sister, the rehab refugee, her con artist mom, and her partner played entirely for comic relief with an endless stream of trivia and ballroom dancing at one point with his boss. Mary Shannon is professional. She takes her job seriously amid the personal chaos. It's the reason the comedy works as well as it does, but between clients who rope her into maid of honor their surprise wedding and mistresses showing up at gallery openings to confront wives... Oh, this was good. Okay, so, top of this episode, the FBI has collared artist Jay Arnstein by putting a wire on his wife, Marcy, and the couple is processed through witness protection to nab international art thieves or something. Jay wants them to bring his mistress into the program as well so he can continue cheating on his wife, who, having helped implicate him, was at least somewhat compromised to begin with, but Mary's like, no, I'm not going to facilitate this. I'll quit my job first. Cut to the next scene where she's helping to facilitate this, and we're cued into her voiceover. Funny how things like mortgage payments and a desire to not eat cat food can get between a person and their principles. Damn, I hate principles. Anyway, 6 months have gone by. Jay is established at a new gallery, organizes a show of 100-year-old paintings on display and for sale by their owner, Kathleen Bailey, as Margaret Chapman, who says her grandfather painted them on poplar. Mary's partner, Weller as Marshall Mann, asserts that they were done on cottonwood. Mary doesn't give a crap what they were painted on. It doesn't matter anyway. Jay is a changed man, wants to turn over a new leaf, and wants Mary to discharge his mistress, Kay, from the program. As she's considering how she'd even get that started, Kay shows up drunk, pledging her drunk, undying love to Jay, and Marcy realizes she's been betrayed not only by Jay, but by Mary as well. Watching this, it occurred to me that this gallery showdown was straight out of a catfight, 1980s primetime dramas, right down to the title of the episode, Who Shot Jay Arnstein? You can't really get much more Dallas than that, alright? Well, the title is something of a spoiler alert. Sometime after this little gallery dust-up, Jay is shot and taken to the ICU. Kay and Marcy are pulled in by local law enforcement as obvious suspects, and as Mary and Marshall arrive at the police department, this delightful exchange happens. Mary! This is Kay. She's still drunk and kind of a derp. Mary, they're keeping me here against my will. Would you tell this moron I have diplomatic immunity? The moron is the impossibly handsome Detective Robert Dershowitz, played by Todd Williams. Mary draws him aside to negotiate for her client's release if they're not under arrest, or to get them counsel if they are. She's still in the evening wear she chose for the gallery show, garnering compliments from Detective Dershowitz that leave her flustered. I had to say, Shannon and Dershowitz's negotiation was gratifyingly compelling. It was well written, beyond the low-hanging, simmering sexual tension. The writers paid attention to what the characters were after and their priorities in the scene, which I gotta say sometimes gets overlooked. Apart from kind of being into each other, these characters are professionals with jobs to do, and the writers spent some energy on that. And while all this was going on, Marshall tells Kay, for future reference, diplomats have diplomatic immunity. You are in witness protection and have no immunity from anything whatsoever. Can you see the difference there? Marcy and Kay are released. Marshall drops Kay off at a crappy hotel, and Mary drops Marcy off at a somewhat nicer one, though Marcy's still ticked at her for bringing Kay into the program, leaving Mary somewhat pensive. We get a couple of voiceovers here as the investigation into the shooting gets underway. When something bad happens to a witness, Mary says, the first thing any WITSEC inspector does is look for how he or she might have screwed up. Was I somehow responsible? Could I have prevented it? If it turned out that Marcy Arnstein shot her husband, I was pretty sure the answer was staring me in the face. Looking for clues, Mary heads to the gallery, and this was the voiceover that made me think of Burn Notice. She says, the first rule of police work is, when in doubt, review the crime scene. Okay, truth is, I have no idea what the first rule of police work is, but if memory serves, it has something to do with keeping your shoes polished to a glossy sheen. More to the point, Mary is a U.S. Marshal, but by no stretch of the imagination does she have jurisdiction to investigate a shooting at an art gallery. Well, I suppose it's just possible since the victim was a client, but even she acknowledges how tenuous this is by her very sneakery. That is, if the federal government needed something investigated, they'd probably establish some sort of Federal Bureau of Investigation. That, as a WITSEC inspector, she's mostly involved with shipping and handling. No matter, she's there, the cameras are there. She'd borrowed Marcy's keys to infiltrate the crime scene and, as Dershowitz points out when he catches her there, contaminate it. Yep, he happens to show up there as well, just in time for both of them to get trapped inside when a Molotov cocktail is deployed and the scene erupts in flames. There's some high drama as Mary tries every single one of Marcy's oh so very many keys on the locked exits, and Detective Dershowitz is not being brave about it. Escaping that, the investigation into the arson reveals Marcy's interest in a local artist, Vidone. Apparently, Jay had discovered Marcy's infidelity, and it had inspired his change of heart to kick Kay to the curb and recommit himself to his marriage. Vidone's work in Cottonwood and his description of the Chapman pieces as pedestrian early American crap, word for word how their owner, Maggie Chapman, had described them to Mary during the gallery opening, piques Mary's curiosity. She phones Maggie and says Jay woke up in the ICU and is asking for her. Maggie shows up there and tries to poison him, but surprise! It's actually Marshall in a silly wig, and the jig is up. Apparently, Vidone had conspired with Maggie to recreate her grandfather's pieces on Cottonwood, then tried to burn the gallery down. The arson would wipe out the forgeries, insurance would pay out, and Maggie could then sell the originals to a collector. Pretty sneaky, and they would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for those meddling kids. It's just Despite the early 80s primetime drama callbacks and the ham-fisted character development, how dare you cheat on me after I cheated on you after you informed on me to the FBI? Oh, darling, let's be together always. God, this marriage is a mess. The show actually wasn't that bad. My initial discussion where it hadn't figured out what it wanted to be, maybe that wasn't such a problem. Heading through the first season to what I remember as the finale, Mary's crazy little sister and her history as a drug addict develops organically into a significant plot point that, had we not had a full season of wacky family dynamics, that would have seemed like it came out of nowhere. So what might initially have come across as unfocused, half-baked wandering developed into 5 seasons of strong, capable storytelling helmed by Mary McCormick in one of the strongest roles in her career. A woman dealing with a chaotic personal life, a career where by definition she needs to be ready for anything, and colleagues and clients and situations that absolutely keep her on her toes, In Plain Sight drew solid talent into sometimes outlandish situations, and yeah, disbelief you may have needed to suspend occasionally from high tensile tungsten carbon reinforced cabling, but still more reliably entertaining than a lot of sustained efforts. So, good work, everyone. Cross Connection. For our Studio 6 Feet Under challenge, no question at all on this one. Apart from Mary McCormick appearing with Studio 60's Bradley Whitford in The West Wing, he actually appears in a 4th season episode of In Plain Sight, so definitely points to Studio 60. Tracking more tenuous connections through my collection, Virginia Williams, the woman who played Kay, Jay Arnstein's boundary-free mistress, also appeared in episodes of The Inside. She was in Veronica Mars. She was in and Out. With Kevin Kline, but more to the point, with Lauren Ambrose of 6 Feet Under. And, along with this and several other episodes of In Plain Sight, Todd Williams as Detective Dershowitz played Letty's outrageously jacked ex in TNT's Good Behavior, and appeared in Ryan Murphy's 911 with Peter Krause from 6 Feet Under. Denied, of course, house rules, same distance from a smaller target, but it's cool to see those connections all the same. But I'd hinted up there at an absolutely outrageous cross-connection I'd discovered in this set of cataloging, and oh, wow, gotta say, my eyes popped right out of my head when I caught... Okay, back in 2008, there was this adorable little comic book superhero-themed series on ABC Family called The Middleman. Think Natalie Morales in a freeware version of Men in Black. I'm absolutely planning to feature this one at some point, but as I scanned at this episode for cataloging, I saw... No, it's not. How could... What? I've got Patrick Fischler grinning broadly as can be as an alien hiding out as a victim of plastic surgery, Dr. Roland Newleaf. Who the hell... Oh, sorry, see, I know him much better as child abductor / protector Smoothie from Happy, now in its 2nd season on Sci-Fi. I could not believe my eyes. Here, the inimitable, the unmistakable, the... say it out loud, odd, just physically weird. He's cast in these things because he projects an outlandish image, but he does such a good job. Well, The Middleman is based on graphic novels, Happy is based on graphic novels, maybe whenever they need a weirdo they call him up, but then, as I continue my cataloging efforts, he turns up again in a 2nd season episode of USA Network's Burn Notice. Huh. Jeffrey Donovan's action-adventure series about a spy who gets laid off and dumped in Miami. I mean, it's goofy, but it's not remotely genre. They pulled Fischler in to play a techie doing data decryption for a security firm. Scrolling through his IMDb, Fischler actually makes a lot of appearances in my collection. He shows up in the opening scenes of Mulholland Drive. Figures David Lynch would have this guy on speed dial. The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., whether I actually recorded that series or not, I definitely watched it. He was in Swimming with Sharks, he was in Birds of Prey, another comic book inspiration that I'm so looking forward to encountering in this collection. He was in Joss Whedon's Angel, he was in The West Wing, so another direct connection to Studio 60 there. He was in Monk, he was in Star Trek Enterprise, he was in Idiocracy, What About Brian, Veronica Mars, Drive, he was in Moonlight, Bones, Mad Men, Pushing Daisies, Lost, he was in Criminal Minds, Franklin and Bash, he was in Grimm. I only watched that one for a couple of minutes, but he was in it. He was in Body of Proof with Dana Delaney, he was in Grey's Anatomy, he was in Castle, he was in Suits, he was in Once Upon a Time. For Christ's sakes, it's like he's a secret message threaded throughout my media collection, like he's the Easter eggs in the Blink episode of Doctor Who. Am I Sparrow or Nightingale over here? Seriously, the man does amazing work wherever he shows up, and I look forward to seeing him wherever he pops up next.
Diving into the classic collection.
I wanted to just zip through this stuff, but I kept finding such wonderful things. Along with actors showing up in multiple productions, I encountered a slug of Simpsons episodes all in one place. One of them, Smoke on the Daughter, had Marge attempt to live out her dreams of one day being a prima ballerina through Lisa, signing her up for ballet lessons with Chaz Busby, a dance instructor modeled unmistakably on Bob Fosse, who, a year ago, this wouldn't have stood out at all, but as I'm cataloging this episode this spring, coincides with the FX production of Lin-Manuel Miranda's Fosse Verdon. Had I encountered this episode a year ago, I might or might not be reminded of its place in my collection as the FX production started up. I might not even have noticed it. Bob Fosse was a towering figure in dance, an immediately accessible, high-profile cultural target for satire in The Simpsons oeuvre. Probably there are Fosse references all over. I've got the TCM presentation of Cabaret recorded to disc 12 of my current collection. I've got Chicago as one of my DVDs, and oh hell, I'm sure I've got this somewhere. One of my favorite scenes is Robin Williams in The Birdcage. It's Fosse, Fosse, Fosse. It's Martha Graham, Martha Graham. It's Madonna, 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 but then you keep it all inside. Brilliant. So yeah, this is one of those synchronicities that maybe seems more interesting than it probably is, but that's part of this project. I recorded the shows when I did, I'm encountering them now as I do, I'm making the connections I make. Either way, it was definitely fun to watch The Simpsons lampoon the broader elements of his personality. In other finds, I'm happy to have the episodes of Monty Python that I'm encountering, but this final season, as it progresses, it just gets easier to discern the contributions of John Cleese to that collective. Interviews revealed the process where there were writing teams that, for better or worse, just came together in the creative process, and without John's steadying influence, Graham's contributions are visibly less disciplined. We know from Holy Grail production gossip that he struggled with alcohol abuse, so Terry Jones and Michael Palin's sometimes goofy contributions surge to the forefront, and you get shop assistants peeking up above counters in monkey masks. You get the prevalence of silly voices to carry the comedy, unforgivably broad physicality, not to mention Uncle Remus levels of racist imagery carrying entire scenes, and apparently no one available to at least... Okay, just as one example, in prior seasons, when someone wanted to do something appallingly racist, someone else would come in behind that and at least try to make it ironic. Now, the target of the commentary, sometimes skewery, sometimes glancing, was, in some cases at least, the policy of apartheid in South Africa, so racists were absolutely being held up as a target of mockery. But in at least one late series sketch where blacks were cast as cricket players who proceeded to throw spears and slaughter their white opponents while engaged in eyebrow-raising levels of exploitative behavior, as a completionist, I was happy to see it, but I was very aware of why these episodes remained largely unaired and how troubling the range of what passed for comedy remained. At a time when America was pitching The Jeffersons, Sanford and Son, and Good Times, absolutely products of their times, to see such unreconstructed exploitative themes in a standard-bearing comedy broadcast is outrageous. That said, while Garrett Morris was a member of the original cast of Saturday Night Live from the pilot episode, we had at least 5 seasons of Monty Python that never featured a single black person once ever, and Kids in the Hall from 1988 that regularly and not at all ironically featured characters in blackface, so clearly comedy cannot be relied upon as our sole engine for social change. It took until 1990 for In Living Color to happen, but at least it did. Closing out this section, speaking of WoW, an entire series featuring 0 black people, I ran into the 2008 Spike TV production of The Factory, a largely improvised situation comedy centered on 4 schlubby blue-collar types whose various sexual escapades in and among their uninspired relationship issues and depressing hard-luck situations wound through their not remotely compelling work environment. In the pilot episode, one of their co-workers, his father and supervisor, was shredded when his tie caught in the machinery, and the whole rest of the episode was them trying to figure out which of them should now be in charge, and the answer they came up with was absolutely none of them. Of course, the guy they decided should now be in charge, the guy whose dad was killed by the machinery, was no more ready than any of them, so, well, that was fairly indicative of the show it launched, so... Oh, but hey, can I actually track this piece of nonsense through Studio 6 Feet Under? Well, let's see. IMDb only lists the 4 main on-screen characters, so this could be a challenge. Well, just clicking on the first name, I'm showing cast member Michael Coleman involved in Monk, so the odds are excellent. Clearly he went on to be involved in much better projects. Yep, The Factory, shockingly enough, has almost direct ties to Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. Coleman appeared in How I Met Your Mother with Virginia Williams, who I just this episode tracked directly back to Studio 60 and 6 Feet Under as part of my Friday night feature. So, yep, even the bad shows in my collection track pretty directly and almost by accident back to decent shows. Well, it's got to be a fluke, right? Nope. Going down the list, I've got David Percasey of The Factory in Superior Donuts with Judd Hirsch from Studio 60. Mitch Rouse was in Transparent with Bradley Whitford, Studio 60 again. Jay Leggett actually made me work for it, but he was in Ally McBeal with Callista Flockhart, in Brothers and Sisters with Rachel Griffiths from 6 Feet Under. Finally, some variety. Seriously, 4 schlubs in an actively uninspired 6-episode series wandered in on basic cable, no trouble at all tracking them. Well, if nothing else, the theory so far seems to be holding up.
Current collection.
Despite out-of-town trips and major movie releases, I've managed to make some pretty good progress on my current collection. Some absolutely wonderful shows, in fact, certainly worthy of more than the glancing attention they're about to receive here, but honestly, since I really want to get to my interview, we're going to do this as something of a lightning round. Saw the 14th season finale of Supernatural, and oh, wow, I kept meaning to bring it up, just kept forgetting, but in the time travel episode of Lebanon, episode 13, back in February, when Jeffrey Dean Morgan as their dad, John Winchester, showed up, a great way to mark episode 300, and then more recently, well, I'd have to go back now, but I thought there was some kind of a thing that rewrote the timeline in such a way that he was still alive, and we saw him again at the end of one of the episodes. Well, nothing but time now, waiting for the premiere of their 15th and final season. I'll probably get a chance to run back and, probably just misunderstood, but it looked like he was going to be around for the final battle, which, from what we saw in the season finale, Moriah, it looked like our heroes were surrounded by evil spirits and abandoned by God, so, yep, I'll for sure be tuning in to see how the Duke boys got out of this mess. Then, in BBC America's A Discovery of Witches, it seems to be a supernatural retelling of a Jane Austen romance, so far at least slightly more palatable than Twilight, but strong, independent, forthright, and beautiful witch married within 4 episodes to a dark, comely, brooding vampire, star-crossed, magic flying in all directions. This could end up being just awful, but for the moment it's still holding my interest. You need to be watching Superstore. Kaliko Kauahi plays Sandra, a character consistently overlooked, misused, and abused by her coworkers. She's unfairly targeted for disruptive posts on social media, and in response to her very first taste of public approval, possibly ever in her life, she whips around and roars, "Union!" This shop has a history of whenever anyone so much as mentions the U-word, there are conference calls with roomfuls of friendly-sounding executives ready to engage whatever concerns the employee has, and district managers are dispatched to, oh, wow, someone has now shouted it, and oh, wow, she's already got a bunch of employees cheering her on. I suspect this is going to get very exciting very quickly. Brockmire, I am just loving this season, but I don't have a lot to say about it right now. Fosse Verdon has been incredible, just loving everything I'm seeing with that. Happy, I know the episode that aired last week is going to be very exciting. I can't wait to actually watch it. I added a few movies, the FX presentation of M. Night Shyamalan's Split from 2016, much better than I was expecting, and X-Men Apocalypse, also from 2016. Happy to finally see that one, too, heading into the summer's production of Dark Phoenix. Very exciting. Turner Classic Movies aired Haunted Honeymoon from 1940, which, oh man, I have so much more to say about this than I'm gonna, but it was an absolutely bizarre adaptation of Dorothy L. Sayers' Busman's Honeymoon, if they let a team of hack comedians rewrite it entirely for broad and occasionally racist humor, not to mention casting Americans as Lord Peter Wimsey and Harriet Vale, but there it was. I'm reminded I caught the 1961 Murder, She Said, the film adaptation of Agatha Christie's 450 from Paddington, or, as it appears on my shelf, What Mrs. McGillicuddy Saw. Neither could hold a candle to the original, but at least the Christie adaptation was recognizable from the source material. And I recently added the AMC presentation of Mel Brooks' 1974 production of Blazing Saddles, starring Cleavon Little, Gene Wilder, and Madeline Kahn. But then, I feel like I've already been witnessing a spoof of 19th century race relations. Oh yeah, in late series episodes of Monty Python as well. Ah, crap, I was going to lightning round these things, and I've still got all of my nerd shows I was going to talk about, and I've not managed to do that. Tell you what, I'm just going to hold off on that and a few other shows I've been watching lately and dive right into my conversation with Mark Bailey with... Oh, just one more thing I've got to mention here. Ralph and I are huge fans of Jeopardy! It's something we watch every weeknight over supper, and both of us want to join our best thoughts, energies, wishing of well with those of everyone else around the world. When we heard longtime host Alex Trebek's health concerns, his battle with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, we were so sad to hear about that. So brave with his decision to maintain his hosting duties. We really hope he can take the time he needs to focus on his health, and wish him all strength and all the best through this time. God bless. Oh, and as I was putting this together...
Is this a honeymoon?
No, shame on you. No hanky-panky before the nuptials.
Not so much afterwards either.
Some days of future past for you. I've so far only cataloged up to disc 673, but that clip appears on disc 2537 in my classic collection, and how appropriate, having just added the late Harvey Korman and Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles in my current collection. He'll be reunited with side-splitting funny man and scene stealer Tim Conway. Reports of his passing this week. The self-effacing but wickedly funny Conway will be remembered as an endless source of joy, and to drop a name, as my friend Mark Bailey, also known as Grailwolf, posted in his memory this day, in fact, to mark his passing. He is responsible for some of my earliest formative memories of comedy and the power of laughter to break down walls, particularly the fourth one. Thank you so much for the laughs, Tim. You will be deeply, deeply missed. Well said, sweet man.
Video out.
So, for Avengers Endgame, Mark and I took in an early show, 9 a.m. on Sunday of the show's second weekend. I noted our fellow moviegoers were going there instead of church, and Mark adroitly pointed out that for some of us that was church. And the parallel holds: tales of epic heroism banding together to battle apocalyptic evil, and an overarching message of faith and hope in humanity. Afterwards, we took the time it took to drive back to his place to just absorb the astonishing imagery of what we had experienced, and I don't know where to put this, but I'll mention that from here on out, spoilers are likely, so if you're still avoiding them, I'll say this: go. The movie is the perfect capstone to a decade of world building, and whether you've managed to get to all the referent films up till now or only to a few of them, you will grok to images and references throughout, and if you've missed any, you'll get the gist. They don't spend a lot of energy bringing the uninitiated up to speed, but even if you've never seen any of them, you will enjoy this film. Beyond that, Sunday morning at 9 a.m., second weekend since film opened, the theater was just about at capacity. So there's still plenty of excitement about this show, and from what I saw, it's totally justified. One theme we do not touch on in our conversation, so I'll just open it here. The film spends part of its 3 hours dealing with the response to failure. Anger, avoidance, depression. People cycle through that stuff on their own timeline, and this film highlighted healthy and unhealthy coping strategies. Our conversation ranged all over the place, though, so without any further ado, let's just get right on into it. Hello, it's Terry Aman here with Mark Bailey, also known as Grailwolf, and we just saw the Avengers Endgame, where I found that I had the body of a Norse god.
I can see that now! Yes!
Yep, I look exactly like Thor, so
Yes.
respect.
Yeah. So, this might be a little disjointed because, as I mentioned to the theater, we both just had actual emotional damage perpetrated on us by a rather long length of celluloid. Or the digital equivalent, I guess.
Uh-huh.
But, whew!
Damage, but also I would have said at least a good portion of it restorative. Now, this is mostly after the restoration of all of the people that we lost all this time ago.
Yeah.
And I guess I would just start out with initial thoughts.
Mostly non-verbal. But to start without too many spoilers, it was pretty much everything that I wanted it to be. And there was a lot that I had anticipated, an awful lot that I hadn't, which is a good mix, you know.
I would agree. Yeah, I stories that you didn't even know you wanted told, like when Tony Stark meets his. Well, yeah, Tony Stark meets his father. It comes like completely out of nowhere, but you realize that was one of the. That was one of the storylines that was from the absolute beginning of Iron Man. And giving his own father parenting advice is that was exciting.
Yeah, that's been set up a little bit from the very beginning, and much more strongly, at least since Civil War, where we got an awful lot of his backstory there. And here's the thing: so often sequels are disappointing, and I think the main reason for that is that sequels are so often tacked on. And even if you plan it out, and you plan, we're going to do part 2 of this, a lot of times it's still like, well, we don't know if part 1 will do well or not, so we're going to make that its own thing, and then we'll have another story to tell. This was not a sequel to anything. What this was the final act in a 13-part series of movies. Yeah. This made it one long story, and it was already a lot like that, but this, I think, cemented it. The final scene in Iron Man, where Nick Fury shows up, turned it from a one-shot superhero movie into the first step into a larger world. Mm-hmm. And this put a bookmark on that. This I think made it one long coherent story.
I would agree. I have seen quite a few of them. I mean, if I haven't seen them in the theaters, I've seen quite a few of them run cable, especially ahead of sequels to the individual installments. And there's huge payoffs in this film. Apart from just Infinity War, which has the very dramatic, oh my god, spoilers, half the people died. But
good guys didn't win.
how are we gonna what kind of a universe are we in after that? Well, one's still worth saving if Tony Stark's daughter is his 5-year-old daughter, who when we saw her is oh god, yeah, you don't want just an alternate timeline. You need
we need to save this world.
Yeah,
that was brilliant, because this is something that has been really absent from most of the time travel stories that I've come across until fairly recently, and I'll tell you where I first saw that really handled well was the show Journeyman.
Oh, okay.
A brilliant, tragically overlooked show. But
no, go into it a little bit.
Well, he just in the show, the main character occasionally slips back in time, to various times, and the things he does when he's in the past do have an effect on the present when he comes back. And in one particular episode, he wound up being at the place where he and his wife reconciled, and something he does sort of interrupts that, doesn't stop it. But when there's a slight change in the way things happen, very minor, just a time difference of a day or two. And when he comes back, he no longer has his son. He has a little girl. And then he's got to try to explain to his wife that he's got to go back and fix this. And to her, she's always had a little girl. Yeah. That, when my son was born, up until that moment, one of my favorite mental games was the what if. What if I could go back in time, knowing what I know now, make some changes, do things. I used to love doing that. Yeah. It was just a fun way to spend. I can't do it anymore because there is no way that I could make a change to a single second of my life and be sure that I would still have my son.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, to alter a timeline, I think it was illustrated best when Hulk confronted
the Ancient One.
Yeah, the Ancient One. And she got to illustrate kind of what we were talking about, where if you change this, then disaster happens. And, well, I mean, potentially, we don't know. Maybe our timeline is the disaster. It's hard to know. I guess if it was reacting to anything, so the entire war, Thanos can't put the gauntlet on if he doesn't have an arm. So you guys really needed to make with the...
You got an axe.
You got the axe. It worked the first time. But yeah, well, Thor had been sidelined for quite a while. It was maybe not at the top of his game. But
not so much. But in terms of the idea of a time travel solution, I found this incredibly satisfying because every other time travel story that I run across has this very simplistic idea of time moving linearly from point A to point B, straight line, and then you make a change, and it makes a change downstream, but that's it. But that we already know. Well, we theorize pretty confidently that there's more than one reality. That there are various realities. Therefore, it makes sense that if you make a change in a timeline, you wouldn't change the future from your point of view, which is now your past, effectively, because you've left it to come to the past. You wouldn't be changing that. You'd be creating a new timeline. And I love the fact that they addressed that. It was I thought very well done, and done in a way that I think that the general audience, will get that.
I accept. Yeah, I completely accepted the explanation that they gave it to.
Yeah.
And I mean, despite the fact that if you do anything, you will have already lived through all of the memories that you have of all of these things that ever happened, and potentially if you change all of that, then none of that happened. What happens if the Infinity War changes in some way that Tony doesn't have a daughter? With the confrontation renewed, you maintain everyone who's already here, the last 5 years that had happened, but also everyone who was snapped out of existence is suddenly snapped back into existence.
Although without the intervening 5 years, which is going to be, I hope they do some interesting things addressing that.
Yeah, I would agree.
I especially wonder about Peter. He was in high school. 5 years have passed. He should have graduated. All his friends that didn't dust will have graduated and be out of college.
Yeah, but for some reason he reconnected with his friend, so I don't know.
He must have dusted because he looked the same age.
Yeah.
There's more to say about this. This is one thing that I think a lot of people are getting wrong in discussing the movie as a concept, is they're saying, oh, it's the end. This is the end of the Marvel Universe. It's not. This is just the end of this story. The universe itself will go on. The movie made $1 billion its opening weekend. They're going to make more.
Yeah. We're gonna have more of this.
But, and they never were intending this to be an end. Well, let me rephrase. They weren't intending this to be the end. They were intending it to be an end. This is an end to this chapter.
Oh, and clearly, as I can't remember, it might have actually been you were saying that there might be some characters that we need to recast. For instance,
Sure.
New Captain America, because he decided to live out his own
the long way
timeline.
home.
Yeah. It took a long way around, and that was
Fortunately,
a beautiful cameo at the end.
Yeah, fortunately, I maintained complete and solid emotional control throughout the entire viewing process.
I have a wet sleeve that suggests otherwise, but I'll...
Okay, I cried, but in a very manly way.
Manly tears.
Oh, good God, it's full on ugly cry from time to time there. That really was one of the most intense, wrenching emotional experiences I've had in a film. And it may have been more so for me than the average viewer, because I've got a very long history with these characters. Not only through the Marvel Universe, but also through years and years and years of collecting and reading comics.
Comic book geekery.
Yeah. So I love what they've done with these. This, aside from just the angsty emotional crises that we were going through, the final battle, when the battle is fully joined, seeing all these characters on screen and just the way they were interacting, the way they were using their powers and their abilities, and just that is a dream come true. That is what I have wanted to see for 30 years. Just ever since I conceived of the idea of them doing films like this. And it's never been possible until now. They couldn't have told a story like this until just this moment.
Is it all the development of the characters up until now and coming to fruition? Because
exactly,
we needed all of that backstory to give a crap.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I felt that was a good part of the story that we just watched.
In order to tell the complete story of this film without any of the background, it would have been 10 hours long. Because you need to know what's going on, what these emotional notes mean. This is, I think it's been brilliantly done.
And just to touch on some transformation, I think that the Tony Stark we met in Iron Man would never have sacrificed himself for the universe, maybe. But I think that Tony Stark was okay with sacrificing himself if it meant that his daughter was going to be alive. I mean, so long as she was going to be okay, he would be okay with not being in that future if he knew she was going to be okay.
And that was perfect. The last scene, the scene with Pepper, we're going to be okay.
Oh God, heartbreaking. I
love that they didn't go for the cheap, you're going to be okay, because he would know that was a lie. But that was exactly the right thing for her to say at that moment.
It was brilliant. There's a lot of very, very well-written points in this.
Yes.
Thor being able to talk to his mom before she passed,
that was the theme, really, throughout the film. Was
reconnections,
healing old wounds.
Cap seeing Agent Carter.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, yes, that was very nice.
Caught in your throat there a little bit.
Yeah, cough went down the wrong.
Damn allergies.
Oh, good Lord. No, it was, I have to admit, I saw that coming. I saw it coming when he saw Peggy in her office in the first trip back. I was like, he's going to go back and stay there. And a little tidbit from real world news. So this was partly spoiled for me, though I didn't realize it was until that moment. Because Marvel is doing their own subscription service. Or Disney is, I should say. And it's going to have heavy Marvel content, of course. And one of the projects they've announced is a TV show that is going to be Captain America and Peggy Carter.
Interesting. Well, they tried Agent Carter. Now, did that actually stay on for very long?
2 seasons.
There's 2 seasons of that one.
They were short seasons and ran during the summertime. I think they were brilliant. Just beautifully. Haley Atwell's amazing. I was sad that it didn't get to reach a conclusion. We know where it winds up is that she becomes one of the first directors of S.H.I.E.L.D. But we never got to see that happen in the show, and I was really sad about that. But it did show Jarvis briefly, the butler, which is a nod because in the comic books, the Avengers who have a butler that serves them, who is under Stark's employ, and that's his name is Jarvis. So that character is a callback to that, but and that was thus the name of the initial AI.
Yeah, that would be where the name came from,
Right.
or anticipated in.
But he was one of the main characters in the Agent Carter series, so that was nice that they brought him back for the movie. They brought everyone back. Astonishing, this cast. I'm sorry, I'm going to go on forever.
The reconnection with Rocket and Groot, the reconnection with Star-Lord and Gamora, kind of.
Yeah.
That was, well, you know what? Comic relief is a part of what...
It is.
You can't have like all of this heavy emotional depth if you don't occasionally get a kick in the nuts, and figuratively mostly, but literally in that case is at that point no, she doesn't have any history with Quill.
Missed the first time we got both this. Yes, some wonderful moments in there. I will say that I've got kind of mixed feelings about some of the comic relief. The Thor dad bod kind of rang a little false for me to start, but I see what they were doing with it, and I think that I'm okay with it. It didn't.
Well, if one character is experiencing that level of
Right.
depression, it's easier to like. I think they did the same thing in Battlestar Galactica with Apollo, where he is like he's super depressed, and it's a way of okay. These people they're sad, but they've been going about their lives. This hit him so hard that he just stopped.
He broke. Yeah, he just.
And it was a way of demonstrating, like showing, really just visually, like, some people are just like, screw it. I'm not. That's my life. No.
Well, I can only
play
imagine.
video games and
Look, it's one thing to be a hero and to fail. He's a god. You know. For all intents and purposes, less so in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I can only imagine the pressure. Not only did he fail his adopted home and the rest of the universe at the same time, but he failed his people. And he is supposed to be a god, a king, a hero, and it all went wrong. So that's the thing. I was questioning it during the film. It bothered me a bit, but in retrospect, I'm looking at it and thinking, number one, it's a valuable thing, I think, in terms of just celebrating neurodiversity and the fact that, everybody's brain is different. We all have damage. We all have problems. We all have, whether it's anxiety, PTSD, depression, any of these kinds of things. Having a representation of that, I think, is not a bad thing. I do like thinking of my heroes as being perfect, but seeing them humanized, I think there is some value in that.
And also the willingness to like fight through, and I mean, I think probably part of the what shifted for him was the reconnection with his mom, and to like, say, hey, I'm worthy, I'm still worthy, is because he probably hadn't felt that, and that was transformative as well. I wanted to just shift gears for just a little bit. When we started chatting, actually when we met online, we were talking about Angel through the Angel chat board. Now,
That is the TV show Angel, the spin-off from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
And it's just like I think that would go back to I think it was the finale or like thereabouts. It was,
we had been in each other's orbit before that, but it was really when they announced the final episode, and we started you started.
Well, that the
bash.
the Farewell Angel Bash, and it kind of felt like we've been able to just sort of keep in touch, but also I mean we had a chance to like really explore these TV shows and really explore the storylines, like make the connections that maybe the writers knew about sometimes, or maybe they just discovered while they were creating these. But some really deep and intense places, and one of the people involved with that obviously was show creator Joss Whedon.
Yes,
and I feel like I did him potentially a disservice, and when I had my VideoFuzzy the video, when I put that together first, it was my first ever video, and it was one of the things that was going on at the time was his ex-wife had posted a blog where like she basically said that he is potentially messing around with actresses or getting emotional entanglements while during some of the shows that he had been putting together, and I had at the time reacted to that as being as part of the like reaction to the Me Too movement as
she very much implied that.
If
she said it makes him a bad feminist, and
Because Joss had been like a consistent voice, I would have said everything before that would have said female empowerment, female agency, and being your own person. For God's sakes, the man created Gwen Raider, the thief. I think it was the 4th season of Angel. But I mean, someone who was like, okay, yeah,
and Buffy.
Yeah. Buffy, of course, but I was saying, like, as superheroes, obviously, the great, but also, super villains who are their own woman and their own
have their own agency, and yes, he's brilliant at that.
And I'd said, well, I mean, obviously, people are multi-layered and they're going to potentially be flawed. But one of the things that you had said after that was like this sort of like absence of voices. I had reacted to like the absence of voices saying, no, that was never the case. But we also haven't seen that.
Yeah, there was an absence. Well, in the initial discussion online, and let me make it really clear that I'm not in any way disparaging his ex-wife. I think she had a legitimate grievance. Basically, we'll never know all the facts, and probably don't need to. But we know that he was cheating for at least a significant portion of the time that they were married, with probably multiple partners at different times. Don't know the details beyond that. In that post, she had implied that he was in some way using his power inappropriately to do this. She didn't come out and say it, but she kind of implied that. She never said who it was, just that it was people he had worked with. That could be actresses, it could be production people, we don't know. But the inference that was drawn was that he was someone who was kind of womanizing, that he was going around and using his power to coerce people into liaisons they may not otherwise have been interested in.
Or maybe they felt that they needed to in order to get ahead in their own career or something.
Right. And basically, the story we've seen again and again and again and again from these stories that have broken about the people in Hollywood and elsewhere. All the people, a couple people on Fox News. We've got a couple of movie producers. The stories are all out there. You can look at them. But it's a common thing in the industry. Now, you're correct that we didn't have a bunch of people jumping to his defense. But I made a point that we had also no one. There were some people that came out in his defense that said, that they had never heard any problems like that. But there were no voices that I heard backing up the claims. There was no one who came forward and said, "Yeah, he was inappropriate with me. Yeah, I saw him being inappropriate with someone else." And being that it was in the midst of the Me Too movement, that this was very much happening, very much a thing, I would have expected that if that had been happening, someone would have said something.
That they would have felt safe, or
exactly,
safer than maybe they would have like 10 years before, or
right. 10 years before, totally. People would have clammed up. That was the unwritten law in Hollywood. But once that started happening, there was a feeling of safety. There was a feeling almost of obligation to say something. And I feel like if things had been the way she implied, I feel like someone would have said something. Now, that's not to say that she's wrong, or certainly at least not to say that she's lying. I think she may have been making some assumptions about what happened, which, she was in
she's going to react to what she reacts to. And
he was a jerk, I cannot condone or forgive, but I don't know that in and of itself, it makes him a jerk in that situation. I don't think it tarnishes the rest of his reputation as an artist or a feminist. But,
and if you look at the body of work, I mean, the creations that he's been responsible for and what he's brought into the world. I mean, the closing scenes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where he basically extended Slayer power to the entire world. Like anyone who can stand must stand, or will
can stand up, will stand up.
And that was everybody. I mean, the way the camera panned the Slayers, all people stand up against evil and save the world from it. It's like, wow, the message there is unmistakable. For something that was just like, hey, what happens if this crazy idea where the crazy blonde cheerleader is the one who saves the world? It isn't just the victim. It's like what that transforms into a story that really people glommed onto in a big way.
Incredibly so. I have talked personally to a number of women who grew up watching the show, which makes me feel very old. And
we are very old.
But I've literally talked to women who say that that show saved their lives. That they were in a place where they just felt they had no power, and this was an incredibly well done role model of taking that power.
Not every show that ends on one network is picked up on another, and in this case, it got 2 more years of life. It became a comic book series. I believe Angel became a comic. Did Angel
did as well.
So, and it became a spin-off. So I mean, that had 5 seasons. So I would have said still very powerful writing,
and could have kept going. It went out on the top of his game.
Support. Leave them wanting more is one of the hallmarks. But
and screw over the shows that you should be protecting is another hallmark of network television. But.
That happens. I think that in that we are like we were able to witness and experience and appreciate these stories. We just have to acknowledge that Joss Whedon, for whatever his personal feelings, has contributed to a world where people feel like they can stand up for themselves. Probably informed some of the some of the empowerment that we've seen. That we've seen in the last few years.
I'll be honest. I'm not sure you would have had a Captain Marvel movie or a Wonder Woman movie without Buffy.
Potentially not.
A fully realized, strong female character. And I keep going back to the speech that he gave, and I'm blanking right now on the organization he gave it to. The crux of it was that people continually ask him the question, so why do you create all these strong female characters? And it's a brilliant speech, well worth looking up, but his final conclusion was, because you keep asking that question, or you're still asking that question. And yeah, it should be a given. If you have a strong character, that character can be male or female. Mm-hmm. Why is that a thing? Why is that?
They're not fanciful or invented. These are characteristics, heroic. Mm-hmm. Average people do heroic things in some cases sometimes, and so this is part of the human story that I think is puts us in the best possible light.
I can actually bring that around to back to the original topic too, because I think that mindset is the same reason why the Marvel films have been so successful.
Oh, yeah.
Because up until very recently, the general idea has been that if you want to do a superhero movie, your film studio buys the rights to a certain character and then creates a superhero movie. The problem is there's no such thing as a superhero movie. A superhero is not a type of story, it's a type of character. And that character can be a lot of different kinds of people and can be in a lot of different kinds of stories. That's something that most filmmakers didn't understand. Marvel gets it because they've been doing it for decades. And if you look at the films they produced, we've got everything from, a World War II vet to a woman who was raised on another planet to a raccoon in a tree to, you've got any kind of character you can think of in there. And the stories range from everything from, comic relief space opera through to political thrillers to more or less, I'd almost classify Avengers itself is hard to classify because it was kind of its own. That would probably come the closest to being a superhero movie if there was, if that could be considered a genre of its own. But it wouldn't have worked without the foundations, as we mentioned, of the other films that came before it, where we were introduced to the characters in their own genre, in their own way.
I would agree. Mario, it was so fun seeing you. I was so glad to be able to just hang out for a while, and I just really wanted to thank you for opening your home and also just this wonderful film that we got to see, and just great to reconnect for a bit.
This was fantastic. I can't tell you how grateful I am for you coming out to visit.
It's just fun.
Oh, then once I got back, I got a chance to experience it a second time. Both Ralph and I enjoyed it immensely. Well done, everyone. Very much looking forward to seeing where they take these amazing characters next.
Upcoming shows.
Very briefly, I wanted to highlight a couple of series that will be tracking back into view here pretty soon. The 10th season of the anime frat boy spy adventure Archer 1999 is set to premiere May 29th on FXX, and unlike vintage Hollywood or island-themed Comavisions, I can absolutely get behind the premise on this one. Very much looking forward to that. Also, the 3rd season of Claws, featuring Harold Perrineau as Ground Zero of a nuclear explosion, is set to start up here on June 9th on TNT, and due to time constraints I'm honestly still struggling with, I had to skip comments on my nerd shows for this one, but theoretical physicist Brian Greene has a special theatrical release of Light Falls, Space, Time, and an Obsession of Einstein on the 100th anniversary of when Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity was confirmed May 29th on PBS at 10/9 Central, following a 2015 presentation of Greene's on Nova. Check it out. And with that, thanks for checking in on my video cataloging project. You can check out my catalog listing along with audio links at VideoFuzzy.blogspot.com, past episodes at Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Again, marking my second anniversary episode next month, so feedback is always appreciated. You can contact me through my blog or podcast sites, or by email, or through my VideoFuzzy page on Facebook, or you can follow me at TJ VideoFuzzy on Twitter. For VideoFuzzy, I'm Terry J. Aman. Happy viewing.
It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find out together on Video Fuzzy.
And now,
Video outtakes.
this is a scrap of audio from my interview with Mark Bailey that didn't really fit anywhere, but I thought you might find it amusing, so enjoy.
This is podcasting gold. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm just going to decide how spoilery I care to be.
Right.
Because there's some stuff that is just going to have like emotional impact that people should experience on the screen. I've always felt that spoilers on a podcast is something like, okay, well, you can listen to me talk about it, but it's going to have just like the barest shadow of the experience of watching the thing. But sometimes their experience of watching the thing is better if you didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
And so I do try to not completely ruin things for people.
By the way, Spoilers on a Podcast was the less successful sequel to Snakes on a Plane. But may have had that wrong in my notes. Sorry.